You're listening to Sound Money from Casey Research.
Hello and welcome to the show with me, your host, Andy Duncan in Singapore. Today from Panama City, I'm joined by Erik Voorhees, who is the co-founder of Coinapult, a popular Bitcoin transfer website. Today we'll be talking about the collapse of the popular Bitcoin trading exchange Mt. Gox and the implications of this for the ongoing future of cryptocurrencies. Hello, Erik.
Hello, thanks for having me.
No worries. Okay, in a recent Business Insider article, you tell us how you just lost $285,000 worth of Bitcoin in this collapse of Mt. Gox. Now, I think that's over $300,000 now. So, do you still believe in Bitcoin?
Yeah, well, of course, the post in Business Insider was focusing not on the fact that I lost money, because I knew that it was risky to hold money at Mt. Gox. They're not a very trustworthy institution to begin with. But my post was really about how, despite that, it doesn't phase my confidence in the protocol or the payment network or the currency itself.
Now, for those who don't know, can you just give us a brief kind of overview of what actually happened at Mt. Gox?
Yeah, so Mt. Gox had been the largest Bitcoin exchange, so the most trading volume of Bitcoin into fiat dollars and yen. For a couple of years, they started to lose people's confidence probably about a year ago, and started having a lot of banking problems and just poor management. And so there were a lot of warning signs all the way up through the fall, and they really lost their market leading position. You know, they were only, I think, the third largest exchange when they collapsed last week. And so, yeah, I mean, they collapsed. They basically are saying that they lost a whole bunch of money. No one is really sure what the details of this are, but I think it's safe to say that Mt. Gox is gone, and there's going to be a long period of legal battles trying to figure out what happened there, unfortunately.
Now, I need to play devil's advocate here. Do you think that this huge loss of people's money like your own means that the whole of Bitcoin should be globally regulated?
Well, I think it's important to realize that you can't regulate away failure. And as far as Mt. Gox go, I mean, this was an institution that should have failed and has failed now and is gone from the marketplace. So Bitcoin is healthier and more resilient now that it's gone. And you compare this with the highly regulated financial system that everyone is used to, where when large important institutions fail, they get propped up by forcing all people to pitch in to bail them out. And apart from the moral hazard that creates, I believe it's just patently immoral to do those kind of things. So fortunately, we have this sort of fledgling alternate ecosystem where when companies fail, they actually fail and go away. And I think that's far superior.
That would be nice if we saw that in the banking industry as well, wouldn't it, sometimes? Now, in the future, how do you think a big kind of takedown like this is going to be avoided?
Well, in the future, the exchanges that have huge market share will have earned it, and they will be much more professionally run. They will have much better systems. But that's something that has to happen over time as entrepreneurs build these things. You know, Mt. Gox was around. They were really the first Bitcoin exchange. They got started by this hacker guy who put it together and was suddenly running a $100 million Bitcoin exchange. That's sort of a recipe for disaster. And the companies, the exchanges that replace Mt. Gox are going to be far more professional, and I would imagine will implement much better procedures for handling these type of things, and probably will offer more innovative things like insurance on deposits, which can be done privately as well. Just because it wasn't done with Mt. Gox doesn't mean that others can't try it.
So you just see this then as a kind of evolution of Bitcoin, a kind of a necessary kind of small step back for 3 or 4 steps forward?
Yeah, I mean, this is the ultimate creative destruction of capitalism. There's a huge market opportunity for people who know how to do this right to step in and do it. And already we have exchanges that are better run than Mt. Gox. So they're gone, and it's painful. It's painful for me. It's painful to the other people who lost money. I take responsibility for having left my funds with a company that I knew to be not trustworthy. So ultimately, that's on me. But Bitcoin itself is far healthier today than it was when Mt. Gox was around.
I always love people who quote Joseph Schumpeter. Now, as an evangelist for Bitcoin, Eric, let's move more into the future rather than looking back at the immediate past. Do you think that, say, within 10 years, everyone will be using some kind of Bitcoin or cryptocurrency on a daily basis?
Yeah, and I think they will, but I would not try to predict how that will actually look. Um, it is a technology that I think will underlie lots of financial transactions and much of the financial world. It will replace many things and change, how banking is done and how payments are done and all sorts of things that we can't even envision. Just like, the internet changed things that we wouldn't have understood back when it was getting introduced. So yeah, I think it'll be very common to send digital money over the internet, just like it's common to send digital information over the internet today.
Do you think gold and silver will play a role in this kind of monetary future, kind of state-free monetary future? Or do you think that these precious metals are just barbarous relics?
So I'm a huge proponent of gold and silver as money, and it was from my understanding of what makes them good money, which what initially drew me to Bitcoin. And I think they're really quite good complements. They have a lot of similarities. Most importantly, they are decentralized and they are not managed by a government. So that puts them both on the good sheet, in my opinion. But Bitcoin is still very new and experimental and volatile, and gold is not. Gold has been around forever. The price fluctuates, but it is relatively stable over very long periods of time. And I would not tell my grandparents to put their retirement money into Bitcoin. I would tell them to put it into precious metals. So I think the complement of an old stable physical asset and a new highly volatile, highly experimental digital asset, both of which compete with fiat currency, is a very good development.
Now, speaking of long periods of time, for over a century now, the kind of Western central banks and all the governments behind them have wielded enormous power over the rest of us with their ability to kind of print money out of thin air and spend it into an economy without going to their own jails for counterfeiting. Do you think they're just going to lie down and have all of this power taken away by Bitcoin, or are they going to come after Bitcoin?
They won't lie down and let the power be taken away. But I think there's a lot of hubris in government and in banks. And I think that when they see Bitcoin, they don't see it as a threat to their money. They probably should, but they don't yet. Instead, they worry more about it for tax evasion, for money laundering, for purchasing of illicit goods, that kind of thing. But they're not worried about the more existential issue of Bitcoin being an actual threat to their own money. So how long will it take them to realize that? I'm not sure, but I'm guessing by the time they do it will be too late.
Now, we had the Chinese government, I think, try to ban the use of Bitcoin, and possibly the Russian government too. Did these bans work or did they fail?
There's some misinformation about what China actually did. So China came out in, I guess it was early December, and basically said that they didn't want their financial companies, their financial institutions dealing in Bitcoin. So that means banks in China should not deal with Bitcoin. I guess some payment companies and other financial institutions should not be involved with Bitcoin. But that was not a ban on Bitcoin. That was just saying that industry segment was not supposed to be using it. So it's perfectly legal for individuals in China to use it, to buy and sell Bitcoin, to purchase products with Bitcoin, to trade Bitcoin. All that's still legal. But of course, with governments, they can change rules whenever they want.
Now, again, I'm going to be devil's advocate here. I want you to kind of flip your thinking around. If you were anti-Bitcoin and you were in charge of a central bank or a government, how would you stop people using it?
That's a very interesting question. I don't know. I mean, that's a hard hat for me to wear. I guess they'll try the typical tactics of vilification, of trying to associate Bitcoin with black markets and terrorism and money laundering and all that kind of thing. They'll try to slander it, but that's really not going to work. I think there's a certain inevitability of fiat money losing to what I call hard digital currencies, And I don't see them as being stoppable, and any attempts are just really going to waste a lot of taxpayer money and time.
So you think the genie's out of the bottle and there's no putting it back in again?
Yeah, just like the genie's out of the bottle on how to do data transmission over the internet, and how people all over the world can publish things without central authorities, and can communicate with each other digitally. That you can't put the internet back in the bottle, and Bitcoin is just one more extension of internet technology changing the way that we interact with each other.
Now, if any of our listeners do still want to get involved with Bitcoin after the Mt. Gox incident, how would you recommend they start going about doing that?
Well, I tell everyone not to invest in Bitcoin unless you have an appetite for extreme speculation and high risk. But you don't need to invest in Bitcoin in order to try using it and to learn about it and to see how it works. So my first recommendation is just to spend some time actually learning about it. It is a little complicated underneath the hood, but of course so is your car, and you still use that without much fuss. So really, just spend some time and discover what this is about. Once you feel like you have an understanding of how it works, then maybe buy a little bit of Bitcoin and try sending it to your friends, or buying something online with it, and you'll see the magic of it. You'll see why people are making such a fuss. Because when you pay for something with Bitcoin and there's no fee to it, and it just moves as effortlessly as an email, you'll understand why this is so important, and why and how silly the prior system actually looks.
Do you think that once we've got Bitcoin to the point where it's as easy as clicking on Amazon to buy a book, do you think that's when it's going to really take off, rather than being this quite technical, geeky thing, which it seems to be at the moment?
Yeah, although I would say that Amazon accepting Bitcoin will be sort of at the tail end of it. It's, Amazon is a large company; they move slowly. They're not going to be an early adopter. By the time it's on Amazon, it will already be widespread.
Okay, it's been great talking to you today, Erik. I'm really sorry about your loss of 550 Bitcoin. Can you tell us a little bit about Coinapult and where our listeners can find out about that?
Yeah, Coinapult is in Panama City. This is where our office is, and we help merchants accept Bitcoin payments and receive normal fiat dollars. We also do business transactions for high volume of Bitcoins, so purchasing or selling them. And you can find our website at coinapult.com.
Thank you very much for your time today, Erik Voorhees.
Thank you.
Subscribe to us on iTunes, or remember to visit us online at soundmoneyshow.com, where you can subscribe to our free mailing list and receive our podcasts in real time. You can also listen to our growing selection of interviews with some of the best-known speakers on money in the world. I'd like to thank Erik Voorhees for joining us on today's show, and I'd like to thank you very much for listening. Until next time, goodbye.